Matthew Wesley Williams. Mr. Williams is the Vice President of Strategic Initiatives for the Forum for Theological Exploration, a national leadership incubator that cultivates wise, faithful, and encourages leaders who make a difference in the world through the church and academy. Prior to joining FTE, he served as a program coordinator for the National Black Leadership Initiative on Cancer here at Morehouse School of Medicine. He holds a Master of Divinity degree from the Interdenominational Theological Center in Atlanta and bachelor's degree in both psychology, philosophy, and religion from Florida A&M University. He is an ordained ruling elder in the Presbyterian Church. Mr. Williams is also a trained facilitator with both the Global Center for Courage and Renewal and the Art of Housing Communities. A thriving cancer survivor and fierce advocate for holistic health and wellness, Mr. Williams enters his story after being diagnosed with stage 4 adenoid cystic carcinoma in July 2014. In his talk, he will explore some of the ethical, historical, and systemic issues related to health equity derived from his learning journey towards becoming a thriving survivor. At this time, we welcome Mr. Matthew Williams to the stage.
Good morning. Good morning. I want to extend a deep bow of honor to Dr. Montgomery Rice and Dr. Satcher, a deep word of gratitude to the Morehouse Center for Transdisciplinary Collaborative, for the Morehouse Transdisciplinary Collaborative Center, to Dr. Holden, Dr. Hopkins, Dr. Devine, for this invitation to share my story as a reflective resource for our consideration of how we might leverage research to advance policy toward the ultimate aim of health equity. And so I want to reflect on the theme of health equity through the lens of my story, to offer some reflections and questions drawn from my learning during this journey, and explore the ways in which my story may be and may not be helpful in considering how we may advance health equity, especially considering the soil upon which we sit here in the Southeast, which constitutes the regional focus area for the TCC. About 2.5 years ago, just after my 38th birthday, I was diagnosed with stage 4 adenoid cystic carcinoma, a rare form of salivary gland cancer. Since that diagnosis, I've been on an extraordinary journey of learning and discovery toward healing and wellness, and I'm grateful to say that I stand before you today in good health. Two years from treatment, great results from my most recent test, and living in a daily practice of wellness and healing. I'm doing well. And I thank my God, my ancestors, my family, and my community for the strength, the guidance, and the support I've needed to walk this path. So I want to invite you to take a walk with me down memory lane. A few weeks before my 38th birthday, during a routine visit to the dentist in early July of 2014, I mentioned that I had this small lump on the roof of my mouth that just wouldn't go away. And looking at it, the dentist said, "Well, you ought to have an oral surgeon look at that." So a week later, the oral surgeon took a look at it and said with confidence, "Well, it looks like you have a benign cyst in a minor salivary gland. These things go away, and these things happen, but this one might need to come out." So when I pressed a little bit further, he said, I asked him, "Do you think it's malignant?" He said, "Nah, malignant tumors don't look like that. He'll be fine." And strangely, his quick confidence slightly unsettled me. I thought, how can he be so sure just by looking? I've never known medical professionals to speak so dismissively without investigating things first. Well, we scheduled the surgery and then we got the lump out. Then a few weeks later came the follow-up appointment and those fateful words back from the lab: "It's malignant." The surgeon was as dumbfounded as I was. And I can feel right now how I felt in that moment with my gut roiling. I believe groans were probably what God made to substitute for words to carry the feelings I felt in that moment. I went home in shock and in terror and looked outside, and just stared at the trees in a daze. And I sat on my bed next to some information on adenocarcinoma that the surgeon had given me. Then the phone rang. It was the surgeon. It turns out I gave you the wrong information about the wrong disease. Let me give you the right name so you can look it up for yourself. The diagnosis is not adenocarcinoma, it's adenoid cystic carcinoma. So he says, please keep me posted as to what the next set of doctors say. Let me know how I can be helpful. And I thought, you've done enough. So now, in addition to my shock and terror, I was angry as angry could be. I was angry at the physician for bungling things. First, for projecting baseless confidence, and then for providing misinformation in a sensitive moment. And it only deepened my pre-existing mistrust, healthy mistrust, of what some call the medical establishment. And it planted a seed in my mind and in my heart. I can't rely on him to guide me. I have to find my own doctor and my own information. And looking back, what I realized is that this series of events early on was a gift to me that would shape the journey that was to unfold. So the next morning, I pop out of bed at about 5 a.m. I took my computer to another room and I began to channel my anxiety into research. And before long, I found the site for the International Support Organization for Adenoid Cystic Carcinoma. And one of the most helpful things I found on that site was a passage that described the practices and profiles of survivors. They offered a lot of good advice. Get second opinions, do your own research, get the support of your community. But these words jumped off the screen. Listen, it says, take charge and manage your own health. Survivors realize that they alone have the disease and they alone have the most influence on the outcome. Ask questions, be persistent in getting answers that make sense to you. Challenge the establishment. I took these words as law. With watery eyes and a quivering gut and shaky knees, I got up from that computer and I said to myself, by God, this is me. This is what I'm going to do. And I didn't know it then, but from that moment, I began the process of becoming a survivor. Taking responsibility for my own health and well-being, slowly but surely letting go of the poisonous idea that they are responsible for helping me stay in a state of not sick. Now that walk down memory lane is just a glance at a few days following the diagnosis. And those days foreshadow a long journey that would unfold to include intense work with practitioners in traditional Chinese medicine, nutritional science, naturopathic medicine, and energy medicine, alongside conventional Western medical practitioners at Emory University and the University of Washington Medical Center. It included a 3-week stay and study leave at the Hippocrates Health Institute to learn and implement a program of personal health, diet, and nutrition. It included a 5-week round of radiation treatment at the University of Washington in Seattle. And it included a radical change in lifestyle anchored by a whole food, vegan, nutritional, and dietary regimen, exercise, stress mitigation, prayer, and meditation, among other practices. And it included an ongoing program of learning that continues to this day about the role and power of the mind, body, spirit connection in individuals, communities, and in the broader society to generate health and healing, and the social, political, and economic forces that drive the proliferation of chronic disease and health inequity in the U.S. My experience has provided me a personal lens through which to view a public crisis. And for me, it's also been a crash course in the ways in which the interdependent industries that comprise what we call the healthcare system in the U.S. generates disparities in health indicators and outcomes according to the intersectional identifiers of race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, gender identity, sexuality, and citizenship status. Also, at a more basic level, it also often reflexively reproduces and reinforces personal and social practices that substitute unsickness for health. But my experience is also teaching me how to build a practice of health-rooted resistance to those dominant practices and patterns, and has exposed me to a movement of committed change makers who are forging transdisciplinary experiments in health equity locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally. So for the next few moments, I want to share with you a few reflections punctuated by questions that have emerged from me during this journey that have relevance, I believe, to this question of health equity. And I want to start these reflections with a question that may serve as a North Star that can guide our collective efforts to foster the highest level of health for all people. And that is, who and what do we value? I'm so grateful for Dr. Kamara Phyllis-Jones and the question she raised as a primary point in this question of health equity. Who and what do we value? To seek health equity, particularly in the Southeast, is to propose a corrective to the culture of Black and brown exploitation that has characterized this region since its formation in the bowels of American slaveocracy. In this context, I believe Black health is a proverbial tide by which all boats can rise. But any discussion of Black health is predicated on and conditioned by how we imagine and confer value on Black life. Black health can only matter if Black lives matter. And I'm aware that my motivation and my ability to be my own advocate and act in my own best interest for my own health required me to determine whether I felt my life was worth saving. I had to love myself enough to beat back the voices that devalue the labor and the lives of Black folk and anchor myself in the conviction that my life is worth it, that my life matters. Over the past few years, the cry of Black Lives Matter, as we've mourned Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown and the Charleston Nine and Freddie Gray and Sandra Bland and now here lately, Jordan Edwards and Laquan McDonald, among many others, this cry has served as the soundtrack to my journey back toward health and wellness. And when Opal Tometi and Alicia Garza and Patrice Cullors coined that hashtag, Black Lives Matter, they were echoing long honored voices like the 1968 Memphis sanitation workers. Remember, I Am a Man? Remember Sojourner Truth's prophetic inquiry, Ain't I a Woman? Black Lives Matter is a mild but a revolutionary declaration. And the turmoil it stimulates is but a small piece of evidence of the fact that while we seek to end health inequity and health disparities, we do so in a context in which the value of Black life is a contested thing, especially in this political moment and in this region, where the legacies of enslavement and the commodification of Black life and Black bodies lurk around every building, barn, and bank. Taylor Johnson Gordon, who co-founded Black Lives Matter Philly and started Sister of the Yam in Philadelphia, says, if we are going to be concerned about Black lives, we can't just be concerned about the quick death of Black homicide and police killings. We also have to be concerned about the long and slow death of what she calls nutritional violence and the ways in which our people are dying from health effects that show up and crop up over a long period of time. So what and who do we value? How might we develop strategies for health equity that not only prioritize Black health, but actively and explicitly cultivate in our people, our projects, and our policy making a deep inward sense that Black communities are worthy of investment, that Black health is attainable, and that Black lives matter and are worthy of care? Who and what do we value? That's the first question. The second comes from my experience as a diagnosed person. And the diagnosis of a chronic or serious disease initiates you into a peculiar relationship with the interdependent industries that together comprise and contribute to what we call our healthcare system: medical, food, insurance, public health, and in my case, what some would even call a cancer industry. While we call these interdependent industries a healthcare system, I must admit, I've often found myself walking in and out of medical centers and hospitals and doctors' offices and pharmacies, and I wondered, what are our systems designed to do? Mind you, I'm not asking what are these systems intended to do. I'm asking what are they designed to do? In other words, how have their constitutive elements been arranged and coordinated such that they function in a particular way? Such that they do this and not that, such that they produce consistently over time a same and similar result. This is not a question of intent, it's a question of design. What are our systems designed to do? I'll never forget an aha moment I had while shopping in the grocery store. I was walking down the two healthy food aisles in the whole store. And then it occurred to me, if this is the healthy food aisle, what's the rest of this stuff? What are our systems designed to do? My friend Christopher Carter, who teaches theology, ethics, and ecological studies at the University of San Diego, tells the story of a call he received from his grandfather one day. His grandfather was a career farmer. Chris teaches about it, but his grandfather doesn't. And his grandfather was in the grocery store and called him and asked him, said, "Chris, what does this label organic mean on this produce?" Chris responded and told his grandfather about the practices farmers have to follow to have their produce certified organic. And his grandfather replied, "Oh, I get it. You mean normal. Normal farming. So why don't they just take the labels off the normal produce and put it on the produce that has all that extra stuff in it?" What are our systems designed to do? When I worked at the National Black Leadership Initiative on Cancer here at Morehouse, Dr. Terry Mason was on our board, and in the margins of a board meeting, he once told me, "Matt, we don't have a healthcare system in this country. We have a detection and treatment system." Healthcare, he noted, would empower people with information and resources with which they can actively care for themselves, and rather than being in a passive and dependent relationship with medical experts. Healthcare, he said, would be designed to tend actively to the cultivation of optimal health rather than waiting passively for disease to show up. And what Dr. Mason was lamenting was that the dominant health paradigm in this country is embodied in systems that are designed at best to manage infectious disease and treat illness, and at their worst can actually contribute to the very illnesses that they're designed to manage and treat. Dr. Elaine Ferguson notes that the medical education in this country has largely been shaped by business interests and focuses the training of future physicians on the identification and treatment of traumatic injuries and acute diseases. And studies on medical education reveal that physicians and medical professionals typically receive little to no health education, wellness training, and nutritional education. In fact, a survey of 127 accredited medical schools in the U.S. found that on average, nutrition was included in less than 1% of lecture content across 4 years of medical education. No wonder my doctors rarely asked me about what I was putting in my body. They confirm what Wendell Berry says. He says, people are fed by the food industry, which pays no attention to health, and then they're treated by the health industry, which pays no attention to food. So what are our systems designed to do? Well, to recognize that these systems are designed is to affirm that these systems are the results of choices. And it's also to affirm that different choices can be made to redesign current systems or to design alternatives that can produce the outcomes that we want to see. So who and what do we value? What are our systems designed to do? And thirdly, a question comes up in a conversation with a friend of mine about my dietary practices and my ongoing learning about health and healing. He asked me a question that I think has great significance for our work. He said, "Matt, how do you see your body? How do you see your body?" And I want to extend that question to this gathering. And how might that our answer to that question, advance or inhibit our efforts toward health equity? I encountered at least two answers to this question in my work with doctors. On the one hand, I made treatment decisions with doctors at UW and at Emory who saw the body as a mechanical and a medical problem with parts that didn't speak to one another. So that if you want to have your heart dealt with, you go to floor 8. If you want to have your head dealt with, you go to floor 9. If you want to have your gut dealt with, you go to floor 4. And never do those conversations intersect with one another, right? But on the other hand, I encountered medical professionals in the so-called alternative space who didn't see health as synonymous with not sick. In that alternative space, I encountered a view of the human being as a whole in a complex living system. So that you can't touch one part of the body and not touch another part of the body. And that health is not just about the individual, but health is also about the community's health and the conditions in which people need to thrive. Health includes the body, it includes the mind, but it also includes the spirit and the cultivation of the life force that connects human beings to all other living beings, other humans, other plant life, animal life, and the living universe itself. So this is what Martin Luther King picks up on in his view when he declared, in the real sense, all of life is interrelated. All of us are caught up in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. So this paradigm offers us something different about how we might view our bodies, how we might view our communities. And so it's not difficult to notice that our understanding of health and equity is ultimately dependent on our understanding of what it means to be human. What do we value? What are our systems designed to do? And how do we see our bodies? And finally, I want to say a quick word about my personal practice and its implications for health equity. My personal practice is a spiritual practice and a political practice. And I've come to embrace an orchestra of disciplines that are required for my well-being as a form of recovering the bodily sovereignty that was denied my ancestors in the bloody soil of this Southeast. My practice is a way of honoring God's wisdom in creation and the ancestral shoulders upon which I stand. And it's also a practice for me as a Christian that follows in the way of Jesus, the revolutionary who beat back the forces of empire and oppressive religion that participated in what Ta-Nehisi Coates would call the plunder of the least, the last, and the left out. But I'm deeply aware that my personal practice or any personal practice is not enough to change the systems and bring about the world that we want to see. The radical change that health equity calls for requires work at a different level. One of the oldest misconceptions about social change is that if you accumulate enough transformed individuals, you'll eventually reach a critical mass or a tipping point at which a community will be transformed. But the truth is, if you want to transform a community or a system, you have to work at the systemic or the communal level, not at the individual level. In other words, you can't work at the level of the atom, you have to work at the level of the molecular bond, the quality and the nature of relatedness between atoms that make the molecule possible. And this is an area, relatedness, in which I believe health equity must work. This is the stuff of community transformation and systemic change. Shifting how we understand and form relationships between ecologies and individuals, disciplines, organizations, and communities in the system, from discovery to delivery, research to reform, seed to soil, field to market, healer to hurting, root to remedy, and farmer to family. So I'm curious about how we might reform the current system, but I'm more curious about how transdisciplinary efforts can build alternatives that cultivate health consciousness and health care, truly. I believe the seeds of the new and the alternative are already among us, and I've seen it for myself. But the new and the alternative can only emerge if we stand and act in what Parker Palmer calls the tragic gap. He calls it the tragic gap because it is the gap between where we want to be and where we are. And he calls it tragic because we who are fighting for something different often have experienced a glimpse of something that's possible. And we know it's not a pipe dream or a wishful thinking, but we know it's possible because we've experienced it. So I've experienced and seen black churches connect with black farmers to create local alternative food systems that deliver affordable organic produce to poor families. I've seen communities of women recovering from domestic violence and other forms of abuse through sustainable agriculture, and a community learning how to grow food and prepare healthy food as part of a spiritual practice. I've seen agricultural organizers build a sustainable organic garden in a South African township, then teach the community how to sustain the garden and make the harvested organic food free to the community. I've seen physicians build thriving practices, integrating the best of Western medicine and ancient practices of treatment and healing. I've seen social entrepreneurs build capacity for wealth creation in poor urban communities. I've seen conscientious business owners shift their business models to meet the triple bottom line of financial, social, and ecological benefit. I've seen it, and I know the alternative is possible. I wonder what you've seen. I wonder what you've experienced. What has seeped into your cells and into your bones? I want to invite you to act and stand and act in that tragic gap in the interest of the world you know it can be. I'm grateful to be here, and again, I'm grateful to be invited to see a gathering of folks who have the capacity to stand and act, to build the kinds of projects, programs, and policies, and ultimately the world we all long to see. Thank you.